Wolfcamp A wells?
And like I mentioned earlier, that all the scenario described will depend on the offset distances.
Okay. Let's assume in a hypothetical that there is offsetting production. Would that result in greater degradation for the 2 wells and 2 wells versus 4 wells at the same time?
Offset production, but also offset distance.
Okay. Okay, we can move on from that. So in paragraph 10 and 13 of your self-affirmed statement, this is where we start talking about the inexperience for Powderhorn, and you've mentioned that. Is it fair to say their inexperience is one of the primary objections you have to their development plan? Their inability to execute as you've described it?
I spoke to the slide that Powderhorn provided that spoke to the capital efficiencies that they would gain. So that's kind of the reference I'm making, that those capital efficiencies would be gained based on the experience of the person or the entity that is executing that.
Okay. And so we've talked about today how the Powderhorn team, prior to forming Powderhorn, which is a new entity, each of those individual team members do have experience. So if we look at your resume, which is incredible, but we can see that you've held a number of positions. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Right. So the first one represented here, let's just start with that one. Baker Hughes, North Dakota, you were an engineer doing drilling and logging. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So fair to say you gained quite a bit of knowledge in petroleum engineering during that time, correct?
That's correct.
And then you moved on to ConocoPhillips, Alaska, from 2013 to 2015. Do I have that correct?
That's correct.
Was the ConocoPhillips team that you migrated to in Alaska different than the team you were working on with Baker Hughes in North Dakota?
That's correct.
Do you feel that your knowledge gained in North Dakota transferred and made you qualified for the position at ConocoPhillips in Alaska?
Yes, I believe that my knowledge was a contributing factor to working in that capacity as a development petroleum engineer. Yes.
Okay. So then you went to work for the state of Alaska from 2016 to 2019. And again, that's another new team, fair to say?
That's correct.
But the prior experience you gained from Baker Hughes and ConocoPhillips, it would have transferred and qualified you for the position at the state of Alaska. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Okay. So last one. Then you moved on to ConocoPhillips in 2019 to 2022. It looks like that was still state of Alaska. New team again?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And then this is actually the last one. So then you moved to the Midland team, different drilling team at the Midland Basin than you had in Alaska?
That's correct.
Did you feel like you were unqualified to participate in the drilling activities for the Midland Basin team because you were a new team member and you guys had not worked together before?
No.
No. So that knowledge was transferable in your case, correct?
That's correct.
So then it's at least possible that the knowledge for the Powderhorn team members that they bring from prior experience would be transferable in their case too. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
Okay.
I'll add one more thing to that. Just like was stated earlier for the Powderhorn team, I don't dispute the experience that they have. The point I made was in relation to the team working together and the knowledge and the institutional capabilities that are built working together as a team, as well as working together across with contractors, right? Testing and trusting the contractors that they work with. So that is what my statement was meant to address, not the individual experiences of the members of the Powderhorn team.
Sure. That's fine. We can just leave it there. So you've heard testimony previously about the bat bomb and war pigeon units. Are you familiar with those units?
I will let my landman address specifics on that, but yeah, I'm kind of generally familiar with it. But I'll let any more detailed conversations around that to be handled by the person most appropriate to do so.
Sure. Well, what I wanted to talk to you about in relation to those two units were whether you were aware when Marathon or Conoco entered into an agreement with Admiral Permian, which is approximately 1 mile east of the Super Hornet wells. Were you aware that they had not yet drilled a well in New Mexico?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. And then, so you probably wouldn't be, but I'll ask anyway. Are you aware that in those units, only the Wolfcamp A is being developed, and it's being developed independently and separately from the Wolfcamp B?
Not aware of that.
Okay. So then you wouldn't be aware if Conoco or Marathon would have stipulated that you had to co-develop the A and the B when it executed those deals with Admiral Permian from an engineering perspective.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. But in general, like I stated earlier, a few factors drive, whether you choose to do so or not. And in this case, the vertical separation and the sequence that that Powderhorn has put forward, based on our experience, would lead to degradation of the Wolfcamp B or Wolfcamp C.
Okay, so then I'm guessing it's fair to say you were not involved in the decision to approve those development agreements?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, that removes a bunch of questions. Okay. Did you provide any sort of reservoir simulation or modeling or data of any kind showing the magnitude of the degradation you claim will occur? Was that the 19% delta, or am I thinking of something else?
That's the 19% delta based on public data on those projects. Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. So if we look at the analog projects that you used, and I want to say the name on the record because I think it's funny, the Potato Baby and the Keg Shell, but you referred to these as the pilot test project. It looks to me like these are 19 miles to the southeast. Is that fair?
That's fair.
In your experience as a petroleum engineer, would that be standard practice to use an analog that's, let's call it 19 miles away when there are other analog wells closer to the project under consideration?
The effort to pick an analog depends on developments that you consider truly analogous to the one that you plan to develop. In this case, the distance is not as much a factor as the vertical separation and the, I'll say, pay stacking. My geologist colleague is going to speak better to this. Those are the drivers for the analogy between the Campana, the Super Hornet development and the pilot that we speak of.
Okay, but there are numerous pads closer to this proposed Super Hornet that have either A and B or A or B development. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if we look at the development plan for the Super Hornet and compare it to the Keg Shell or the top down, is it fair to say the development plan for the Super Hornet is similar to the, let's just call it Keg Shell development?
The development for the Super Hornet, which is a sequential Wolfcamp B development, is more analogous to the Potato Baby development. Yes. But like I
But-
mentioned earlier, the vertical separations are different. So in the Super Hornet case, you have a smaller vertical separation and compared to the Potato Baby project.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So if we consider all 8 wells, so the eventual A and B wells that Powderhorn has listed versus the 14 or 15 in the full stack Wolfcamp and the keg shell, that's a pretty material difference in number of wells, at least in density, correct?
That's correct.
Why, or would you say this difference, would it be due to changes in the rock?
Yes, partly so.
Okay. So changes in the rock, in your opinion, where the rock changes, it changes how it reacts to spacing and parent-child and all those sorts of things, correct?
That's correct.
In your opinion, does the timing between completions matter for the parent-child degradation we've been talking about?
Yes, timing is a factor.
So if we go then back to the Potato Baby, how long did Marathon or Conoco or the operator in that case, how long did they wait between completing the wells in the A and the C?
The timing difference in that instance was about 3 years.
Okay. If we look at the differences, I believe it's in your exhibit slide, maybe it's 5, that shows the 19% delta. You're aware of that graph. Is it fair to say that the parent-child, trying to think of the best way to ask this because I'm not an engineer. The parent-child degradation, it doesn't show overall that there's lower production. It's just that some wells produced less and maybe some wells produced more. Is that a fair assessment?
What that graph shows is that the typical well or the average well drilled sequentially, similar to the Super Hornet proposal, would underperform the average well drilled in the Wolfcamp C or Wolfcamp B in a co-developed scenario.
Okay. I may come back to that, but for now, here's a general question. Would you consider, in your opinion, that depletion, is it a function of well density and time? Is that a fair statement?
It's a function of vertical separation, time, as well as the confinement status of wells. Yes.
Okay. If we go to your self-affirmed statement, paragraph 12, you acknowledge that 1.5 mile laterals are, as in your words, generally recognized as as favorable compared to 1 mile wells. Do you still stand by that testimony?
I think it's common knowledge that most companies would prefer, longer wells where possible.
Okay. And I just want to, just so I'm clear on the nature of your objection. So despite that recognition, you still recommend Marathon's 1 mile plan. And in doing so, you call Powderhorn's plans, in your words, riskier. Is your basis for that recommendation and concern, is that primarily Powderhorn's lack of operating history as a team? And it's also the parent-child concerns. Do I have that right?
Yeah, those two factors come into play.
And we've talked a little bit about drilling contractors. and you state that Powderhorn has not identified a drilling contractor. What is your basis for that statement?
I think statements made just moments ago also attest to that.
But you haven't had conversations or spoken with anyone prior to this hearing about Powderhorn drilling contractors, correct?
Personally, no. Not anyone in Powderhorn's shop.
So if we were to look at some of the ConocoPhillips activity in the near area, let's use the Magellan pad. That's a pretty good analog. You can see that Neighbors Industries is doing some work out there. Are they owned by ConocoPhillips or are they a contractor?
ConocoPhillips uses contractors to drill wells. Yes, if that's what you're asking.
Does Marathon generally prefer to drill, and this may be more of a land question, but I'll ask you anyway. Does Marathon generally prefer to drill in units where they can achieve longer laterals and a higher working interest?
Could you please restate the question?
Yeah. Does Marathon typically prefer to drill in units where they can achieve longer laterals and where they have a higher working interest?
Yes, that's generally the case based on my understanding.
Okay. And were you aware that for Conoco's Q4 earnings call, Q4 2025, the guidance provided was that 90% of its 2026 program is going to be 2-mile laterals or greater. Is that accurate?
I think that statement was made describing the program, not setting a goal as to future development or something to that effect. Yeah, so that's my understanding of that statement.
And you're aware of the statements from Conoco's executives that going for 1 to 2-mile laterals, it generally improves the cost of what's called, they refer to as cost of supply by 25%. Is that accurate?
I recall seeing that statement. Yes.
Okay. So if we compare the perforated lateral length between Conoco's plan and Powderhorn's plan, how much more perforated lateral length will Powderhorn's plan have than Conoco's? I'm sorry, the initial plan. I'm sorry, excuse me. I left out a very important word. How much more perforated lateral length will Conoco's, the initial plan that Conoco advanced? How much more? You know what? Let's just skip that question. It's a double negative. It's too hard. Okay, if we go back to Marathon's plan, so in a world in which the north half is developed under the JOA by Marathon, under that plan, the northeast quarter has no clear development path, correct? We have a hypothetical, there could be a stand-up U-turn well by Powderhorn, but there's no clear path to developing that northeast quarter. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of could you put up the exhibit you talk about? So I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I believe it's your exhibit, your rebuttal exhibits 1 through 2. Where they should, it's the no acre left behind slide. Outside of your hypothetical 2-mile U-turn, if Powderhorn's development plan is denied today or this week or at the end of this hearing, the northeast quarter of section 3, there's no clear development path for that acreage. Is that correct?
I cannot speak to that this time.
Okay, so we talked about, we talked about the JOA, the 76 JOA. Are you familiar with that document?
No, I'm not.
You're not. So then you wouldn't be aware that under that document, these wells that were recently proposed under the JOA by Marathon, that there would be a contractual obligation to spud those wells, the Campana wells, on or before April 13th. Are you aware of that?
No.
Okay. So then for the Campana wells, there's been no pad built. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware of any pipelines or midstream that's been run to the proposed location?
Mr. Hearing Officer, I just say this is outside the scope of both his direct and rebuttal testimony. He didn't testify onto pipelines or anything along those lines.
Mr. Holloway?
Marathon made an issue of Powderhorn's takeaway capacity, and we're just proving, the line of questioning is intended to prove that Marathon has not taken these concrete steps to drill the well on or before April 13th as required under the JOA.
Just not within this witness's scope.
Mr. Holliday, I think the issue is that Mr. Rankin is saying this is not the right witness to ask that question
Okay.
to.
That's fair. We can ask it to a different witness.
So I just have a question since we're talking about things. It's 5:06 now. How long, and I'm not rushing you, but how long do you think your cross-examination will continue?
I have about 10 more questions.
10 more questions. Okay, please.
So it'll last as long as it takes me to ask clear questions, I guess. Are you aware as to whether or not these Campana wells, have they been allocated a drilling rig in Conoco's 2026 program?
Again, this is not within the scope of his direct or rebuttal. So I just point that this is not the witness who raised any of these issues.
Mr. Holliday?
Well, then I would ask, who is the appropriate witness I should ask these? Because Conoco proposed under a JOA, under which they have obligations to drill. And we can't tell whether there's any concrete evidence taken to actually physically execute, whether money's been allocated. I mean, they're the ones that included in the exhibits their well proposals under the JOA. So I think that makes all of this relevant. And I'm happy to ask that to whomever is the appropriate witness, but I think someone at Conoco needs to answer those questions.
Okay. The objection is that it's outside the scope of this witness's testimony. So I think your best option would be to ask every witness, and you might not get an objection at some point, or I might have to overrule the objection at some point, but we'll get you an answer at some point during this hearing.
Or maybe I'll catch Adam sleeping.
There we go.
Doubt it. Okay, well, so you don't have any information about capital budget, not the right witness. You might have knowledge of this as an engineer. We can say that those wells have not been spud today, right?
Mr. Holliday, it just has to be within the scope of his direct and his rebuttal. So if it's outside that, then you're going to get the same objection. I might as well tell you now. So I would stick to what this witness testified, the subject matter this witness testified.
Okay. All right, fine. Okay, then I'll have 3 more questions. If the division were to deny Powderhorn's application, then you would not be aware of any division order or mechanism that would require Marathon to drill within any specific time frame. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would not be aware of any.
So fair to say it could be this year, it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, and then that would be within Marathon's discretion under the JOA. Is that correct?
I'm going to object to the question. And again, Mr. McQuay is a petroleum engineer. He's not familiar with the JOA. It's not directed to the direct witness, not within the scope of his testimony, direct rebuttal.
Mr. Holly.
That's fair. I'll reserve that question for Ms. Klingler. I think she's familiar with it. That is all of my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Fordyce?
Yes, Mr. Imekwe, I'm looking at rebuttal exhibit 5. And I believe you've stated that in the potato baby spacing unit, there are parent wells that were drilled in the Wolfcamp A. And then 3 years later, approximately, there were these other project wells drilled in that same potato baby unit in the C, and then co-development in the neighboring spacing unit, the keg shell. That time frame, you think, is about 3 years between these drilling and completion events?
Yes, about 3 years between the drilling event in the Wolfcamp A compared to the drilling event in the Wolfcamp C in the potato baby unit. So the left side of the image of the gun barrel.
Is it possible, or are you aware of any other completion design changes or production factors, or could there be some discrepancy because of improvements in takeaway that would cause some performance discrepancies or changes?
Are you asking if there are factors
Yeah,
beyond?
are you aware over that course of 3 years, could there have been possibly changes to completion designs or efficiencies, improvements in production performance due to some improvements or efficiencies at surface? Is there a possibility there was improvements in takeaway capacity? Are any of those things that I mentioned potential factors to affect this data?
Not to my knowledge that those factors you mentioned would be drivers for this observation.
Are these two spacing units, do they have developments around them, or are they like on an island? And the reason I ask is I can't tell, from your locator map, what development is around these two spacing units. And
Yes,
again, the
they
reason I
have-
ask is, let me rephrase my question. Is it possible that there is some activity around these spacing units that it could have potentially caused some depletion over the course of 3 years?
There are activities around these spacing units, but based on the pilot study, the design, the execution, and the analysis, those are not the drivers for the performance difference that we see here.
Okay. If we could just turn our attention maybe to rebuttal exhibit 6. On the left, we're looking at maximum and or how you interpret the graphic minimum horizontal stress direction. Some might call it preferred frac plane. Just based on this, if it was my well I was planning, it looks like I would be planning to drill east and west. On this slide, you're showing basically wells that were drilled before 2017 and wells that were drilled from 2017 onward. Obviously showing some developments east and west, some developments north and south. Is it possible that operators are drilling one direction versus another just because of where their acreage interest is? So they form a spacing unit and drill, whether it's east and west or north and south. Is that possible?
Yes, that is possible.
But there's no data that has been compiled or presented showing a comparison of production or performance from wells, either drilled east-west or north-south. That comparison on orientation has not been made. There's no data for that, correct?
That's correct.
I have one last question on rebuttal exhibit 7. It looks like there's a quote that you've taken from a paper maybe written in 2015 about rig efficiency of 11% that's been realized over the course of working with a rig for a year, correct?
That's correct.
So Marathon and ConocoPhillips are large organizations that track a lot of metrics. Can Marathon or Conoco present some actual metrics and data showing how a field improvement team or working with a specific rig or contractor resulted in an 11% increase from the day they picked up a rig until a year later?
Could you please restate that question?
Well, my question is, I know that I'm sure that Marathon and Conoco track a lot of metrics. You've supplied a quote from a paper. Is there metrics that can be presented? Because I'm sure that that metrics are being tracked to back this statement up.
I don't have those numbers from ConocoPhillips operations to be able to provide, but I agree with the statement that metrics are generally being tracked.
All right, thank you, Mr. Umekwe. I have no further questions.
I have two. I hope that they're not redundant with yours, Mr. Fordyce. Mr. Umekwe, can you provide specific data showing that Powderhorn's 1.5 mile laterals will result in less total resource recovery than Marathon's 1 mile laterals?
Mr. Examiner, you're asking for data to show that Powderhorn's 1.5 mile, or what performance Powderhorn's 1.5 mile might provide compared to Conoco's 1 mile?
I'll ask it again because I'm not sure I understood you. So I'll say it again. Can you provide specific data showing that Powderhorn's 1.5 mile laterals will result in less total resource recovery than Marathon 1 mile laterals?
Yeah, Mr. Examiner, I have not compared that, but that is data that could be compared.
Okay, but it's not something you have looked at.
No, I've not compared that information.
Okay, and I have a second question. You talked about parent-child degradation. Is it a certainty, or can it be mitigated through simultaneous completion techniques?
Mr. Examiner, the plan that ConocoPhillips has put forward or MRO put forward that develops these two benches simultaneously is a plan that mitigates that parent-child degradation that we're speaking of.
So I'm trying to understand your answer. Are you saying that it's your plan that mitigates, or Powderhorn could mitigate?
I'm saying that the co-development of both benches mitigates parent-child degradation that would occur in a sequential development of the Wolfcamp C. So if the Wolfcamp A is drilled first and later on the Wolfcamp C, there will be that degradation. But if drilled together, you mitigate that.
Okay, so then are you saying that the parent-child degradation in attributed to Powderhorn's plan is a certainty?
Based on the analysis that we've done and the project that I cited, that would occur if the Wolfcamp C is developed sequentially. Yes.
Okay, that answers my two questions. Thank you. Mr. Rankin, where are we now?
I just have 3 follow-up.
Go right ahead.
Redirect. Dr. Umekwe, you were asked about the public statements made by ConocoPhillips during its 4th quarterly report, saying that they would, to the effect that they intended to try to do 90% or more of their wells 2 miles or greater. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I do.
Now, that means there's going to be 10% of the wells that are less than 2 miles, correct?
That's correct.
And these could be among those 10%, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Holliday asked you some questions about whether or not you see a potential for a clear development plan that would include the northeast quarter of Section 3. Did you review the rebuttal exhibits that Ms. Klingler prepared in preparation for today?
Yes, I did.
And I'm going to show you rebuttal exhibit number 1 and rebuttal exhibit number 3 that she prepared. Do you agree that what's represented on those 2 rebuttal exhibits is a potential clear development plan that would include the northeast quarter of Section 3?
Yes, I do.
So here's rebuttal exhibit 1 and then rebuttal exhibit 3. In both instances would show a clear development plan for the northeast quarter of Section 3. Agree?
I agree.
And then the hearing examiner asked you a question about whether you had any data that allowed you to prove whether Powderhorn's 1.5 miles will result in less recovery than Marathon's proposed 1 mile wells. Do you recall that question?
Yes, I recall that question.
And the problem is that Powderhorn doesn't have a track record and hasn't drilled any wells, whether they're 1 mile or 1.5 miles. So there's no data against which to compare. Agree?
Yes.
No further questions, Mr. Examiner.
May this witness be excused?
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Umekwe.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about how we're going to proceed tomorrow. I know that sometimes witnesses come from other places and they need to get home. Is there anyone who has a flight tomorrow that I need to be aware of? It's hard to hear you. Oh, got it. Okay, I heard that part. Yes. You're riding together in a car. Oh, you're driving. Okay. Back to Midland or someplace? Tonight. Okay, well, you can appear tomorrow virtually by all means. Yeah, thanks for coming. But is there anyone who has a flight or something that I should be aware of?
We moved ours to tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we should be done by then, but it's not really under my control, as you can see. So I'd like to start early tomorrow so that we hopefully will be done before I have a doctor's appointment at 1 o'clock. It's a doctor's appointment I've waited for months, and you know how it is with doctors in New Mexico. They're not easy to get to. So we can either finish before that or we can take a long lunch break and come back after that. It's really up to you guys how you want to proceed. But what is the earliest you want to start tomorrow?
I can do it.
Okay,
As early as you would like.
okay, 8:30? That works for you? Does
That works,
for you,
that's fine.
Ms. Vance? All right,
Yes.
8:30. And for the witnesses?
Yes.
Okay, all right, great. You'll be calling your next two. So which will you be starting with this gentleman sitting there?
We'll be starting with Mr. Wood,
Oh.
the geologist, and then tipping the reservoir.
Fine.
With the caveat that I don't know, I don't expect those to go as long as we did today.
Right, okay. Yeah, you never know. All right, so if we started at 8:30, so Mr. Aragon, you're available, I think you're virtual, but you're available tomorrow at 8:30?
Yes, sir, I am.
You are, okay, wonderful. Okay, then we will start at 8:30 and we'll know by noon if we need to take a long lunch or if we are done, obviously, before that. And then we can talk about post-hearing submissions and transcripts and all that good stuff then. Is there anything else we need to deal with today? Everyone says no. Then we're off the record. Have a good evening. Thank you.